Stand on your I already messed that up. I was gonna say stand on your feet, stand on the box, stomp your feet, start clapping. Got a real good feeling something bad about to happen. That's not making it onto the final podcast. Guaranteed for sure. But what's up, people? Welcome back. It is Brews and Baseball, the podcast edition. Reese is giving me a stank face, which you can't see, and I think I'm depriving you all of seeing the lovely stank face that Reese is making right now in response to that. It was really me trying to recite the beginning of Something Bad by Miranda Lambert and Carrie Underwood, but I failed miserably at that. Off to a great start as always. Welcome back to Brews and Baseball. This is episode 4 of our podcast edition. Thank you folks for joining us. Hope you are having a good Wednesday or had a good Wednesday. Hope you are fine and dandy. On a bit of a somber note, I want to start the show just with a little quick message for everyone out there. I've personally found out in the last couple days, last day or so, that a couple people that I've known have passed away, and just to say this as a message to live your life as fully as you can, to live in the present, and most importantly, I would say to always check in on the people that you love and care about. Life is short, it's fleeting, as we know, but that doesn't mean we can't live it. That doesn't mean we won't live it, and we are living it by doing episode 4 of our podcast edition of Brews and Baseball. That's what we do. He's Reese, I'm Owen, if you didn't already know. Reese, welcome back. Good to have you as my co-pilot. I'm your co-pilot. You can fly with me anytime you like. Won't let you down, Goose.
No, you could be my wingman anytime. Let's bring it back up again.
Sorry, I had to get that out there, but we're good to go now.
No. It's an important message. It's great to be back, and I want to tie this into our podcast in some form before we get to the introduction of the beer and stuff like that. Life itself is truly a miracle. Each day you got. We take it for granted a lot of the times, and really, if you can find how special even the mundane moments are, that's really the key. And by extension, our podcast tonight is about some of the miracles that we love in baseball, and we'll get into that soon. But before we do that, I want to make sure that Mr. Owen Hill introduces the beer for today, one that I am truly excited about. Mr. Mr. Hill, take it away, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Well, I just have to say, first and foremost, for the folks at home, the reason Reese is so excited about this beer, this lovely Tower 1 beer from Trustworthy Brewing Company, is because of the two following facts. Fact number 1, we have ourselves a double IPA, not one, but two, a double IPA, first and foremost, getting that off the chest, number 1. And number 2, the ABV. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, folks around the world, my friends, we have ourselves an 8% ABV beer for this evening. We are jumping on the high ABV train for episode 4 of our podcast, week 4 of our new format, beer number 2 of the week. God, all these numbers and ratings and such. Listen, this is a bold choice, but I wouldn't have it any other way. This is exactly the kind of beer that I've been looking forward to trying on stream with Reese. So, listen, there's no blurb on our can for us to show you this time, unfortunately. We do have the flavor notes. We have Simcoe. Again, more Simcoe from our friends at Trustworthy. We have Azaka, and we have Comet. These flavor notes, these hops, these different aromas that we are about to enjoy here in this can of Tower 1 DDH double IPA.
As you can tell, I'm over the moon. And now is our opportunity. The first blurb that we weren't able to find, if you tuned in last night on Tuesday, which is last night, for those of you playing the DVD home game, we had a can that didn't have a blurb on the side, but I was able to find it online. I tried looking for it for this can, couldn't find it. So now we have the opportunity to make our blurb based off of how it tastes, our reaction to it, all of that good stuff. So I'm very excited about it for the obvious reasons. I just say, let's get a first and sipping in there.
I'd say it's time.
Get cracking.
It's time. It's well and truly time to operate.
But first, the ASMR opening. Oh, there it goes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
I happen to be walking here.
And we are using the pint glasses tonight because dishwasher make dishes go hot.
Correct.
And we tried to chill the glasses before the show because some of us just got home. And, we decided let's not risk cracking our hallowed beer mugs. We can go with the pint glasses. Maybe it'll offer something different with the shape of the glass. Here's something that we got to do one day. I'm going to make a kind of a mental note about this. We should try our favorite beer of Trustworthy's at the end when we have gone through their selection, as 'twere.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe try them in different types of glasses. As you know, we normally have the beer mugs, and now we have the beer pint glasses that you can't really see because I'm still working out the kinks on the green screen, both literally in the fabric and technologically.
It does look good, though. I will say that. It does look really good.
It looks a little bit better tonight. There's more attention that we need to pay to it, but we're making our way downtown, walking fast, faces past, and I'm homebound. Another glass that we could try is the chalices that we have.
This is
and
true.
I just wonder if the shape of the glass would affect the taste in any way. It sounds dumb. I get it. It sounds dumb. But, when has any experiment not had at least a little bit, you shouldn't have do that. That's dumb. Gravity, Sir Isaac Newton. That's dumb. Apples fall because God makes them do that. You know what I mean?
No, you're not wrong.
That's so.
Yeah.
So I'm doubling down on it. I think we should do that on one of the shows one time, maybe a bonus episode. But we'll talk about it.
Yeah, a little behind the
and
scenes.
As usual, get the big old head going.
Yeah, I gotta have a little Brews and Baseball behind the scenes, a little after dark. a little mixture of the various Brews and Baseball
The show
content.
that's not for kids.
Yeah. Really just let it fly on the Brews and Baseball After Dark. But
while the head calms down a little bit, I don't know, man. Which miracle do you really want to start with? I think I have an idea, but based off of your jersey, I might not be so sure anymore.
Well, okay, so this is going to require a little more discussion, mainly because I don't think it would be classified as a miracle, more so as an improbability. So I'm not necessarily citing it as my miracle. I'm more so bringing it to the table because in 2022, this past season, a lot of the chatter around the team that plays at Citi Field in Flushing, in Queens, was compared to the 86 Mets, who I know you...
Meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Yeah, I already know what you're going to say, that they're comparing him to the 86 Mets. Incorrect. Not correct.
No,
even in terms of talent.
No, but last year, as far as like a lot of the clips, a lot of the highlights from the Mets last year were drawing comparisons to the 86 Mets, like, oh, there's a special feeling about this Mets team. And it kind of just so happens that 86 Mets team has something that the 2022 Mets team does not have, something that the jersey from this team, the jersey earned by the team before this, the 2022 Atlanta Braves, do have. And it goes on the fourth finger on your left hand. It's called a ring. And the Braves have one of those. And the Mets, under this current ownership, do not as of yet. However, I am terrified of what the Mets have done in the offseason. And I'm not looking forward to facing Kodai Senga, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, etc. 15 times a year.
Before we get headlong into that, my head has calmed down enough. I was able to fit the entire thing, actually, in this. So I'm going to go ahead and take that first and sip and let's go.
As will I. Time to go. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. Whoa.
Not what I was expecting. Not what I was expecting at all. And that is not, it's never a bad thing on this show, but like I was, with something as intimidating as a DDH DIPA or double IPA, you're expecting a lot of punch, a lot of flavor, all of the above. But I will have to say, it's good. Like
it's juicy.
There's no punch. It's like smooth. We got to find a better word. It's not smooth, but it's that. You know what I mean?
It's juicy. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like you're drinking juice. It's the flavor kind of all hits you at once, and it's an 8% double IPA. I mean that to me is the most astounding part. And you just said it. Like you're expecting a double IPA to have some sort of bite to it, have some sort of punch, but this just. I mean, that first sip was incredible. Like. Whoa.
Like, I don't know if you could tell, but after the sips, I was doing a lot of tongue work, especially on the lips, like a little kitty cat, because I was like, hey, what's going on here? Not only is my body and my mind confused, but especially my mouth was just like, where did the punch go? You know what I mean? And
where's the taste? It's everywhere.
But yeah. Look, that's good. And I have to say, as much as I appreciate a punch in a double IPA or the bitterness of a double IPA, whatever your preferred descriptor is.
Yep.
This is fantastic.
This is
one of those dangerous drinks, I think, because
oh my.
For someone who might not know that this is a double IPA, you know what I mean? Like a mimosa with like a little bit of Everclear in it, and you're just gunning these down, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's like, I ride home, you know?
it reminds
me
always
drinking responsibly, kids out there and adults of legal drinking age.
No, we're assuming that if you're joining us and enjoying the beverages with us, you are of legal drinking age, or drinking within legality of whatever your jurisdiction is. But all that to say, this is dangerous. If you blindfolded me and told me this was 8%, I wouldn't drink it like it's an 8% double IPA. I just would not. I'd refuse, and not because I refuse to, but just because it doesn't present like one, and that's a huge factor in determining what you're good. Like, you know, if you're out at a bar day drinking with the boys and you want to get a picture of something, right? And you're going to go through, you know, say you have 4 or 5 guys, you're going to go through several pictures. You don't want to go through, you know, 4 pictures of this and still have to drive, put it that way. This is incredible. I mean, I was expecting the bite. I was expecting the double IPA to fully slap me upside the head. This did not do that, and in the best possible way.
This to me rivals Brass Jar. I think one of the things that we might have to do in the glass episode that I was talking about, maybe we would have one of the DIPA and one of the Brass Jar, or maybe just our top favorites, you know, if we were able to mix and match one day. Correct. Or we could just go out to Trustworthy and just do it ourselves, record it, you know, whatever. We got to figure that out, but that's beside the point.
Exactly.
The thesis of my statement is, Lord have mercy. This is, this is up there with Brass Jar for me. And I think the next item on the agenda at this point would be, so 8.0 ABV, I would say out of 80. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think we've done small numbers this whole time. And I'll try to show on the can if the green screen will allow me. But yeah, you can't really see with my particular camera. But if you look closely on the left-hand side, yes, the left-hand side for me, there's a little icon that says Verdugo Mountain Way Trail. So my thing is, it's got to be out of 80 watchtowers. You know what I mean? Could even make them Lord of the Rings watchtowers. But what do you think, Bud? What's
80 watchtowers? I think is good. I think that's probably in line with what I would say as far as picking out how to rate it. It's just good Lord, man, this is a good beer. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, every.
I already know what mine is. I already know what my rating is. I doubt that it'll go any lower from there, but you can keep going.
The thoughts are circular. It goes from whatever we're talking about to, man, this beer is good. Every single time. It's just like, we're at this lot. This is a good beer, man. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, it's reverting to that. So without further ado, Reese, out of 80 watchtowers, where would you start?
77
out of 80 watchtowers, double IPA, 8% ABV. That's in line with what I would expect from Reese. And why?
Not only does it have the points in that it's a high ABV, it's a double IPA. Those are the things that I generally prefer. But it is refreshing to have a double IPA because sometimes it can be too harsh. It can kind of have that Purell bitterness, and you kind of have to put up with it sometimes in order to have the flavor. But I think the combination of the amount of hops as well as the light citrusy flavors, whatever citrus it might be, I think this is the thing about Trustworthy. I think the theme of Trustworthy is that they have beers that are trustworthy enough to introduce either new beer drinkers to off of the top, or introduce them to new types of beers that they would not normally try.
Right.
I think that is the overall theme for Trustworthy. This is probably one of the most prime examples of it. And 77 Country Roads Take Me Home to the Watchtowers where I can drink this IPA. Double IPA.
I mean, my only question for you is why well, let me rephrase that. Would this beer get a full 80? Or would any beer in regardless, or I guess in its particular arena with that specific rating thing, would it get an 80? So like if I were to give you a a Red Hook. What is it? Big Ballard.
Big Ballard.
If I were to give you a Big Ballard, what would you give a Big Ballard as far as like, you know, percentage wise, close to a perfect?
Well, it's tough to say because the nostalgia factor is really in it for me. That's where I grew up. That's all of that kind of stuff. I think that's a bit of an unfair advantage compared to Trustworthy. I think in general, I will never, ever give a beer a perfect score. And it's not because that it isn't a perfect beer or that it isn't exceptional. It's that I'm an artist, actor, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And part of what we do is like figuring out how we can tweak things just a little bit to kind of make it different or make it better, if you want to use those terms.
Yeah.
Could I find fault in this beer? Yes. But it is so ticky-tack. Like literally it is an NBA like charging call a level of ticky-tack, or like a 3 in the key level of ticky-tack, or they don't call travels anymore. So, I mean, a travel in the NBA.
A double dribble, a travel, whatever you want to call it, really. That's kind of what we're after as far as what you can really nitpick at. So that's interesting you say that, because I feel like the only thing I could find wrong about this beer is that, and this might be more of a commentary on Trustworthy, which, by the way, I want to do this right. Head brewer Zach Johnson at the Burbank location. Zach, my man, you are a master at what you do. We salute you here.
All rise.
All rise for. Oh, I think they only got part of your audio.
Well, that was a bit that I just came up with off the top of my head, but you can understand the level of respect we were trying to convey with these statements.
The utmost respect. I mean, these are just really good beers all around. I think my only criticism of this beer would be, and again, I think it's more of a Trustworthy wide thing than a commentary on this specific beer, but I've noticed that the beers at Trustworthy, they tend to be, misleading is not the right word, but it's sometimes you get
they blend identities.
Exactly. It's a case of less mistaken identity and more so just this beer presents more like something else. That's not to say that it's bad. That's not to say that it's wrong. It just presents in another way. But that can be, in this case, to me, that's a really good thing, because a lot of people, I mean, you're one of the exceptions maybe, but a lot of people that I know, they wouldn't look at a double IPA and go, yeah, I signed me up for that 8% ABV. You're just like, IPA, highest ABV on the list. Give me that one. I mean, that's literally how a Northwest flavor. There you go, folks. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Us Northern boys, we're not reasonable people, but we do enjoy our beers. I think that's right. I don't know if this is the right way to describe what I'm about to describe, and just feel free, internet, to give me a slap. But it feels like that it's not a margin of error and it's not a spectrum, but it's a sort of let's call it a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
You have a Venn diagram with all of the individual beers, and I would say Trustworthy doesn't have its own circle. It's kind of in between certain intersections with other beers. And look, I you know me, in terms of characterization, identity, and all that kind of stuff is mainly used for marketing purposes rather than for the benefit of the consumer, in my opinion.
Yep.
This is mainly for baseball, but I think also for beer too.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So just look, there's great stuff. And I think if I were to add a ticky-tack of things for this particular beer, it would be that it doesn't have enough of a punch. It almost like, it's not that the flavors drop off at the end, but it just feels softer, and I'm insane enough to where I like it a little bit hard. So like that's the only reason. And yeah, sure, was that kind of a dick joke? Sure. But like
I was waiting for you to say it. No, I mean,
I like them a little had
little had. No, but that was legitimately my only criticism of it as far as the flavor profile. The fact that it's not, you don't get the same bite of a double IPA. It's a good thing and a bad thing. But I guess to your point in rating beers, you know, we do want to be not hypercritical, but critical to the point where it's like, I enjoy beer, and we, you know, naturally as humans, we tend to be more critical of the things that we enjoy the most. So naturally, we tend to be, you know, you and I are hypercritical of the Braves and the Mariners, and we're hypercritical of beers. So it's just kind of the way it goes. You know, if you love something, you want the best for it. You want it to get the best of itself. You want to get the best of it, and that will lend itself to more ticky-tack criticism, in your words.
Right. It's with that being said, though, I think in terms of my opinion, that would be its fault. But at the same time, to someone else who might not be as big of a fan of a DIPA, or might be scared of a DIPA, this is a huge W. Yeah. Because the flavors aren't as intense, but it still gives you the ABV to send you to the moon if you would like, in a responsible manner. So yeah, just fantastic all the way around. What's your rating? Because we've swan dove into mine. we swan dove into yours, and we're gonna piggyback off of that. I'm gonna go 75 right out of the gate. It could get better. That's big. I do think there's an element of, I don't know how to categorize it. It'll probably come to me by the time we get to the second beer, but I think it's a little bit of it's a little bit of an after effect that immediately is not as apparent. I think it's because my frame of reference with IPAs is so strong, especially with double IPAs, that it's like, if you're drinking a double IPA, you're getting into something pretty significant, and you're gonna feel it. And I think pretty strong.
This you can feel it a little bit after a couple sips, and that's, I guess, if they would have figured out how to get over that, then I would have been like, I have like 10 out of 10 no notes. But 75 out of 80 for our beer rating system is very, very good. I mean, I think 2.75 out of 3 yesterday was the advanced placement lager, and then the brass jar, I can't remember what the rating was, but it was high. It was very, very high. I mean, a lot of these beers at Trustworthy have been incredibly high, and again, that's just a testament to the hard work that they put in, and you can tell they brew this beer with, you know, with the love and compassion that beer properly brewed requires. So 75 out of 80 is a very, very strong start.
So I'll tell you what, to give the proper respect that Zach Johnson and all the people at Trustworthy deserve, I'm going to bring my mic up so I'm allowed to do the thing again. So let's all rise one more time. Now that this bit worked so well.
And now we rise.
Time, and then I'll bring the mic up a little bit. Here we go. And we salute. Okay, that's good enough. So I only know those 3 notes, and that was pretty much it. I want to say this too, and then I want to give it back to you in order to continue with the Mets, but I just thought this was very interesting. Our beer is out of our beer is 8.0 ABV. Mm-hmm. Our rating is out of 80.
Yep.
And the reason that we're talking about miracles in baseball tonight is because on this day in 1980, which is 43 years ago, if my math is right, I did not do well in those classes.
That is correct.
Either.
43 years ago today.
The Miracle on Ice took place.
That is correct.
And there have been a lot of miracles in baseball, and it is now our job to decide which ones are miracles and which ones are just merely improbable.
So I like that spin, because we had this segment a little earlier before we got into the beer where we were talking about that specific thing and why I'm wearing the Braves jersey. Go Braves. but I like that. I like that little note.
And to jump back on that train too, is that I wouldn't call either one of those teams miracles, and I know you weren't either, but even the comparison between the two teams is just kind of tough for me because it's just two completely separate identities. The New York Mets of 1986 were more bad boys than anything else, a la the Detroit Pistons or Oakland Raiders back in the day. You know, those guys were doing drugs all over the place. Darryl Strawberry is a very dominant personality, very strong personality, to put it as lightly as I possibly can, along with many other members of that club. We have perpetual pretty boy Keith Hernandez on that team. And I know you don't like it when I talk about Keith Hernandez, but I love me Keith Hernandez. That guy... that guy is something else. But yeah, I think, and especially 2021 Mets, they didn't have kind of a sliver of that sort of identity. Sure, the plays might have been similar, but if you stack talent enough with cash like the Coens do, you know, it's like you're destined to have a lot more opportunities to replicate famous plays from back in the day.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Mariners, you know, we haven't had a double ever again, you know? That was just a one moment that's never going to happen again. And of course, to replace it, Cal Raleigh's home run to clinch the wild card for us against the Athletics last year. So, yeah, no. But thanks, though.
Well,
but...
so...
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so the reason I was referencing the Mets is because in a lot of the plays they were talking about, I remember recently, I can't remember exactly when this was, but I watched a video of some of the biggest moments from the 2022 season, and some of them were big Mets plays, and the broadcasters were like, yeah, I know, it's the 86 feel all over again. And I don't know if that was more in reference to the fact that was the last year the Mets won the World Series, or that there was a special feeling around the club. I mean, because there are certain years where you just kind of get certain feelings around different teams that, like, no, this is their year. I remember in 2021, and this was obviously way before Acuna's injury, but on opening day, Pablo Sandoval, who wasn't even on the team after the trade deadline, I think he was part of the deal that got Eddie Rosario, he hit a game-tying homer in the top of the ninth in Philadelphia on opening day. And I was like, whoa, this is and then there were a couple of really special wins the Braves had that year, all before Acuna got hurt. But all this is to say that they were saying that the team in 22 for the Mets had this sort of a vibe that 86 had that was less along the lines of the personality and more so just things breaking their way. Obviously the 86 Mets is the infamous call where Bill Buckner has one go through his legs at first, and the Red Sox end up losing that series, and the Mets won that World Series. And so that was the reason I brought up the 86 Mets. And we were talking earlier in the week about our favorite miracles in baseball, like you're saying, to commemorate the 43rd anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, where the U.S. men's hockey team beat the Soviet Union as it was back then. And it was more so just, you know, there have been things that have been improbable in baseball, but not necessarily miracles. And I think just the fact that the miracle Mets, quote unquote, got brought up so much last year is kind of what brought me to think, like, what's the difference between something that's a miracle and something that's just highly improbable?
Right. Yeah, and even this is another thing that I was thinking about this morning, because I was watching 4 Days in October, of course, the Red Sox thing this morning, but I was also thinking about the ball going through Bill Buckner's legs in 86. Like, that's definitely something that is very improbable. I used to think it was a miracle because I was like, stuff like that really never happens, but I'm reminded, and Secret Base did some research on this. The Mets and the Red Sox had played an exhibition match earlier that season, if not before the season. And guess what happens? The Mets win, and a few of the runs were scored because a ball went through Bill Buckner's legs at first base.
I mean,
and another thing on top of that is Bill Buckner. I mean, his injuries then were well known, and he really got dragged after missing that. Like, it was his entire fault that they lost, which is just nonsense to begin with. But people knew that he was injury riddled. His knees were gone at that point. And normally they would have a defensive substitute at that time. But the rumor is, I don't know if it's confirmed, that Sparky Anderson, I think he was the manager of the Red Sox at that time, kept him out there because he says, no, I want to win with my boys. You know, I'm not going to put in the defensive guy. I'm reminded of 2011 where they're like, yeah, let's leave Nelson Cruz in the outfield to try and catch David Freeze's fly ball to right. But that is kind of a change for me. That was going to be one of my miracles. And now I just think it was extremely improbable and really just bad managing on the part of Sparky Anderson.
Yeah. I mean, it splits a crowd because at the end of the day, and the older I've gotten, the more I've kind of realized this in sports, we tend to have a laser focus on specific moments that are pivotal. There's a great sabermetric analysis that I think has become a lot more common in recent years, which is hits that generate the biggest win probability added. So basically, how much does one play move the needle on the probability of your team winning this game? And so obviously big moments like that, like Freeze hitting one over Nelson Cruz in 2011, or like we're talking about, a ball getting through Bill Buckner in 86, those are huge plays as far as the win probability added for their teams. I mean, for the Mets, it won them the game literally. For the Cardinals and the Rangers, it basically lost the Rangers the game, if not the entire series. But the
tied
game
it in the ninth,
right?
Yeah.
But the game is played over 9 innings, over 4 quarters, over 18 holes. The games are played not over the span of individual plays, but over long stretches of time. And so there's multiple opportunities within every game to create chances, to hit shots, to score goals, to score runs, to make putts, etc. Apply this to any sport you wish. But it really comes down to how much do we focus on specific moments. And so, like you're saying, Reese, this really does kind of feel more like an improbability more so than it does a miracle. The 4 days in October for the Red Sox in 2004, that I think you would be very hard pressed to find many rational people who could say like that's not a miracle, because there's no other way in hell that a team that has seemingly every card in the deck stacked against them, playing against their most bitter rivals who had their number all year, could rip off 4 wins in a row. I mean, every sign in 2004 for the Red Sox points to a loss at the hands of the Yankees in 4 games or 5 games. But over the course of games 4 through 7 in that series, in the 2004 ALCS, the Yankees had moments where they could have won. They should have won the series. They had several moments throughout games 4 through 7. And, well, game 7, not as much. But they had moments where they could have won. And they capitalized on none of them. So really, when it comes down to looking at, okay, what constitutes a miracle, part of the conversation also has to be how many chances did the other team miss, and what is the likelihood of that happening over and over and over and over and over again. Because with Buckner, it's one play, right? It's one play in a pivotal situation, but it's one play. It's not, I mean, I'm sure the Red Sox, I wasn't there, I wasn't alive, neither were you, but the Red Sox and Mets, I'm sure in the span.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, I was not alive in 86. I can't speak for you, even though I'm pretty sure you weren't alive in 86. But
I'm eternal.
But the point is,
you know that Disney Marvel movie that was made, Eternals? That's about me, but they had to like make it into 12 characters.
Yeah, right. So you're just everywhere.
But
no,
here's
I guess that's kind of my point, is that you have to look at it in the context of a longer it's either a 1 in a billion type thing to be considered a miracle in my eyes, a 1 in a billion, or a series of like 1 in a millions back to back to back to back to back to back to back that all pay off.
Well, and I'm going to add to that miracle a little bit, because you have to look at the entire history of the Boston Red Sox. Up to that point, they had not won a World Series in however many years that was, 2004 minus...
I think it was 86
was it
at
1919? 86 years. So in 86 years, they have not won a World Series. They've come close, but not close enough. You're going up against a Yankee dynasty, and I mean that because I would say that the Yankees dynasty at that time in the mid-90s through the early 2000s-ish was probably the best Yankee dynasty they've ever had. I know that people make the arguments, oh, what about them in the 1920s or the 50s and the 60s where they won a bunch of championships? Like, yeah, fair, but they didn't have as many teams, not as much travel, all of that kind of stuff. Not to mention in the 1920s, an entire section of the American population was not allowed to play. For reasons we will never understand. And that's what I just think it makes it so improbable that the Yankees were so stacked. And then when we go back to the Red Sox lineup, they had a lot of great pieces. I mean, you have Manny, you have Johnny Damon, you have David Ortiz, sure, 3 big players. And you have the pitchers, Bronson Arroyo, you had Pedro, some great pieces. But I don't know if they had a similar stacked amount of pieces as the Yankees had. And also, that team in certain times reminds me of the 2001 Seattle Mariners, in that they might not have the best looking lineup on paper, but they somehow got the job done. I mean, you're looking at names like Bill Miller, Trot Nixon, Kevin Millar,
Mark Bellhorn.
Not really household names.
No,
outside
no.
Bellhorn out. Because I mean, you compare that to the 01 Mariners. You got John Olerud, sure, a good player, but Mark McElmore. You know, all these guys had their Mike Cameron. They all had great years in that particular time, but you wouldn't say, oh yeah, these are some of the best players in the business. Wow, the Mariners really had a stacked team there.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think the combination of that too also amplifies how wonderful it was. They were down 3-0.
yeah.
I mean, the Mariners in 95 came down from 3-0 against the Yankees. That'd be the only counter argument I would have. And it was in the same dynasty in 95. So, did I just stumble into a counter argument to your improbability versus miracle, sir?
Ruh-roh. But no.
It's almost like everything is arbitrary. Wow!
Well,
God!
Hey, look, I mean, it's like we talked about it before. The beauty a lot of times in what you appreciate. I mean, it's just that it's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What you appreciate is what you specifically may happen to appreciate. So it goes for music, it goes for film, it goes for any sort of any part of life is what you get out of it. The what you find in it is what you get out of it is really what you choose to find in it. And I think with regards to those two situations, Mariners in 95, Red Sox in 04, it becomes, okay, well, who, big picture, who has the deck stacked against them the most, or who is in the kind of worst possible scenario, or to whom are the odds really, really frowning upon? Are the odds really not in your favor? And so it just becomes, okay, well, if you look at them kind of holistically, they're very, very similar arguments.
And I'm still looking back, and it's crazy how the connections still come to happen, because we made the comparison to the 95, excuse me, the 95 Mariners. To a Northwest boy, now we had your moment as a Boston Red Sox fan, but for a Northwest boy, we would not have baseball in the Pacific Northwest if it weren't for the 95 Mariners. I could go for several hours as to why, if that season didn't happen, we did not deserve a baseball team. The 95 Mariners, we had, in terms of things stacked against them, not to mention we hadn't won anything in 19 years, and we had no hope of winning anything in 19 years. Griffey was out for a good chunk of the season for an arm injury when he just Spider-Man jumped into a wall. So we were without our Hall of Fame key piece in center field for a lot of the time. The stadium was falling apart. The previous year, a couple of tiles came down, and when people tried to fix it, a couple of people died. There was all of the reasons to stack up against why we shouldn't keep these people here, or this team here. And boy, it was just at the right place at the right time. And it doesn't seem like it was many direct movements. Everything just kind of seemed to fall into place. And I think for me too, that has to be part of a miracle, because you have people like Moneyball, Billy Bean, and all of those kinds of guys that worked really hard to build that team for less, but this team, it was just like all of a sudden, all of the pieces seemed to click together. Tino Martinez had a career year that year. Edgar Martinez was beginning to really shine as the DH role. Griffey is always Griffey. He will never stop being Griffey, even when he's retired.
Yep.
Jay Buhner put up some big numbers. Broadcasting legend, and also, I assume, some sort of wizard, Mike Blowers, who was our third baseman during that 1 year. He was trash the rest of his career. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm sure. He was trash. He came up with some clutch hits during there. Just all of the pieces seemed to fall into place. And it was just really grateful. And I think we should just say that 95 was a miracle year for the both of us, because the Mariners had their season, and the team in the 90s got to win their World Series.
Mm-hmm. I would not be alive if it were not for the year 1995. Literally.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was about to say, it's just like, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the World Series. It's like, all right, let's not unpack that.
No, the joke, folks, if you can't pick up on that, is I was born in 95. So there we go.
Mr. and Mrs. Hill are watching the show right now, and they're just like, I'm not watching this anymore. This is crude.
Sorry, Mom and Dad. It's funny because my late friend was actually born, I think, 5 days before the Braves won the World Series. So he was a good luck charm. So, but no, it does bring up the question, like, what do you really constitute? What do you really consider a miracle, right? Is it a single thing? Is it a long-term thing? Is there a huge parameter on what can be a miracle? There's like the Minnesota Miracle in football a few years ago, where the Vikings were down by like
Minneapolis
3 or 4.
Miracle.
Minneapolis Miracle. Vikings were down by like 3 or 4, and Keenum throws a ball to Stephon Diggs, and the Saints cornerback tries to undercut the route and misses badly, and Diggs takes it down the sideline for the win. There's the miracle at Anfield, where Liverpool beat Barcelona 4-0 at home without two of their best players. I mean,
the other miracle at Anfield, where Arsenal took the title from Liverpool, beating them 2-0 at Anfield, you mean? So that wasn't a miracle at all. They had bad form towards the end of the season. But yes, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And then the slip for Chelsea, or for Man City at Anfield, where Stevie G slipped. I mean, you could you could go on and on about, okay, what really constitutes a miracle. But I think for, to kind of simplify it and tie it back to baseball, which is why we're here, it really just comes down to the situation, the odds, the big picture, and then if it's a specific game, because, the criticism against baseball, of course, is they play so many games, but really that kind of has to be thrown out the window, because it is a big picture thing. Like it has to be, all of those other miracles are inherently big picture items. Baseball just happens to be more magnified because they play more games. And that's not a knock on the sport. It's just a matter of fact kind of thing. So I guess to go back to the original, is there one that's more of a miracle than others with the Yankees and the Mariners? It's really just kind of, it's in the eye of the beholder. I would classify them both in that same way, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Well, I think in order to constitute a miracle, it has to happen over a period of time. We talked about Buckner. That was kind of a one play. We talked about how he was injured, all that kind of stuff that kind of set him up for failure. I think it has to either be over an extended period of time. It could be multiple games, multiple series, all that kind of stuff. How many cards are stacked against you? It's funny that we seem to be gravitating towards moments that talks about either dethroning or at least causing public embarrassment to the evil empire, to the very original Miracle on Ice. We defeated the Soviet Union. Back then, communism to Americans was the evil empire. That's Reagan, I think he used those exact words.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of baseball fans, with the exception of New York fans, would call the Yankees the evil empire.
Right.
Because of their tradition of big spending, the high pressure media cooker of New York, all of that kind of stuff. So I think those are really the two big criteria. And I think also, how many cards do this particular team or this particular individual have? You know what I mean? I'm transferring it back to 2004. Like Kurt Schilling, and he had his injured foot. I don't know the extent of the injury, but I mean, it was bleeding enough to where it would cause anybody pain. It was a deep enough wound where, and you have to understand, and I look towards Randy Johnson in terms of his pitching mechanics. Placing your foot down when you pitch is just as essential as the foot that is pushing off of the rubber to get you more velocity to get you to the plate. If you can't lay that foot down in the right way through multiple pitches in multiple innings, you just won't be effective on the mound.
Yeah.
And I don't think Kurt Schilling even then had that. It was Schilling, right? I'm not
Schilling. Yeah. No, Schilling was the bloody sock.
Yeah, because they so Schilling is, like, when he puts his foot down, like, if he isn't effective, I don't think he has the talent to have that kind of disadvantage. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that if he was not able to control his foot the way that he did through the injury, power through, he said he couldn't feel his foot. I've played through multiple iterations in that in soccer where it feels like you can't even run like a pirate peg leg. Just to see him as effective as he was, I think that's a pretty good inclination that was a card that was stacked against them, or a card that they didn't have, I should say. So in short, criteria. It has to be over an extended period of time. It can't just be one moment, because it could be managerial decisions or just other sort of active nature things.
Yep.
And it doesn't really... while it might have ended the game, it didn't have a severe impact over the whole, if that makes sense.
Yep, correct.
And the second criteria, how many cards are stacked against you? Are you going up against an evil empire? Do you have any... Are all the players having the greatest years of all time? Has something else happened outside, whether it could be political, it could be something outside of baseball that could be stacked against them, or against... or for the opposing team in their favor. And then the third one, their particular team themselves, how few cards do they have?
Yep.
To play? I think the 2004 Red Sox have that. I think the 1995 Mariners have that. I think the 69 Mets had that. Not the 86 Mets, because the 86 Mets won over 100 ball games. I want to say 106. That's a lot. They should have won
a lot of baseball games.
World Series, if not make a deep run. So I guess the only question is do you have any others on docket?
I put a
that are
couple
worth bringing
down
up?
that I think I wanted to talk about. And I think they mainly had to do with they mainly dealt with the ones that we've talked about already. So 04, we didn't talk about 95. At least I didn't put 95 on here. But 04, 2022 with the Mets talking about 2022, 86, of course. I'm trying to think. This one I would say is less a miracle, more a huge improbability and a kind of like you had no business being here type deal. But the 2013 Red Sox winning the World Series. So that Red Sox,
all Red Sox.
Well, but it's not because I grew up a Sox fan. I mean, specifically because I'm Manny and Big Papi. But it's not because of that. But you think about there was the stretch from 2011 to 2013, the start of the 2013 season for Boston. So 2011, the offseason before, so 2010 winter, the Red Sox traded for Adrian Gonzalez and they signed Carl Crawford to a big contract. And they, in no uncertain terms, just stumbled out of the gates in the most hilariously terrible way possible. I think in April, they had a record of it must have been 9-25 by the end of April. The Red Sox were one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in baseball out of the gates in April 2011. They turn around and they play the best baseball of anyone by a country mile. I think their winning percentage was north of 750. It was actually crazy how many games they won in 2011. September of 2011, of course, they have the big collapse, and they and the Braves get knocked out of the playoff hunt on the same day within probably half an hour of each other. That was a painful night specifically, but that ended up as a huge disaster for both of those clubs. So 2011, that happens. 2012, Bobby Valentine's the manager, and there's just a huge dumpster fire, and then the trade to yeah, that's right. They got traded to the Dodgers. So Adrian Gonzalez, who else was part of that trade? Carl Crawford, I think. I think Nick Punto was involved in that trade. It's been a minute, but the Red Sox were just in all kinds of disarray. They had all sorts of problems. Guys were eating chicken and drinking beer in the clubhouse during games, mostly pitchers when they weren't pitching. It was a whole mess. So 2012, the team wins 70 something games, and it's just horrendous. So that offseason, they sign a bunch of guys to 1-year deals, hoping they'll pan out. Mike Napoli, Shane Victorino, I think Saltalamacchia was already on the team, but he wasn't a household name. David Ross, Mike Karp, Daniel Nava was one of the big contributors in 2013. And all of a sudden, that team out of nowhere, Johnny Gomes is another example of a guy on a 1-year deal. All of a sudden, this team, yes, they had good pieces, but they had no business winning 97 games that year, or however many games the Red Sox won in 2013. I mean, it's actually stupid the more I think about it. They had no business being as good as they were, and they won 97 games in 2013, and they were on the verge of being knocked out by the Tigers, who ironically were, as we're talking about the Mets, ironically their 1-2 starters were Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, who are now the frontline starters for the New York Mets. And
Mike Ilitch stacked that team.
Yeah.
He was just like, I'm about to die. Buy everyone now.
Those Tigers teams were insane. That was Miguel Cabrera at the height of being Miguel Cabrera as well. And it was just it must have been in the wake of the Boston Marathon bombings. The Boston crowd willed them to win. I think it was whatever game it was, where Big Papi had the grand slam off of Joaquin Benoit. And it was just one of those things that's this team had absolutely no business being as good as they were, and yet they ended up going to the World Series and winning the damn thing. So, and it was a bunch of guys who, they had been journeymen. They'd been around the league a few years. They hadn't really been as successful. I mean, yeah, they had Dustin Pedroia and Xander Bogaerts came up that year, but Bogaerts was a rookie and Pedroia was kind of slowing down already. It was just a collection of things that they don't make it a miracle in my eyes. I wouldn't classify 2013 as a miracle, not like 04. But
I was gonna say, it's like if you were, I was gonna have a little counter argument there.
No,
for you.
but it was one of the single most I mean, kind of like the '95 Mariners. It's I mean, the Mariners I would actually call a miracle, but it is the biggest statistical improbability for that team to be as good as they were for that entire year. And I think it was incredible for that to happen. And in John Farrell's first year, no less.
Did the Boston Red Sox win the AL East that year?
I'm pretty sure they did.
So here comes a slight counter argument. I know you weren't saying that this is a miracle, but I want to tie it back into miracles and get it out of our biased regions, if you will.
Yeah.
I would hazard to say that both the 97 and the 2003 Florida Marlins are among a couple of those miracle teams. I could go for a long time through the whole ownership situation. Jeffrey Loria, how he just desecrated Montreal, was somehow awarded another team in Florida after just desecrating the Canadian fans up there, with the exception of Toronto, of course. I should say the Quebecers. In 1997, so obviously the Florida, now Miami Marlins have two World Series, 97, 2003. They've been mostly trash the rest of those years. How many East Division titles do you think they have?
None.
0.
They have not won the NL East in their history.
They won both of those World Series being the wild card team.
Yep.
That alone, I think, should be up there. I know that the postseason, it's kind of compressed, not as much as today, but it's a compressed amount of series in that, you know, it's only a select number of games, and if you lose, you're out. That's it. But they came from the bottom of the ladder both times and somehow figured it out. And of course, 97, we tie it back to the evil empire. Not evil, because the empire, let's put it that way, in the Yankees. And I would say that the 97 Yankees were probably one of the best out of all of those teams. Because I think that was when Bernie Williams had his great year. And I think Derek Jeter had not an exceptional year, but one of his best years that year as well. I think in many articles, I can't remember if it was 97 or not, or maybe it was 98, where they equated it to Murderer's Row of 27. And, you know, you go up against a team like that, still somehow make it. And I'm just looking through here at some of the people that they had to give up for big pieces. They gave away young Trevor Hoffman. Trevor Hoffman obviously became, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame, but he's definitely one of the better.
I'm pretty sure
he's in the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame reliever, had to give him away, but they got Gary Sheffield back. You know, in retrospect, was that the greatest deal? Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter. But you had a bunch of talented young stars that were coming up, and they had to rely heavily on them. Of course, Edgar Renteria is the first one that comes to mind. And let me see if I can scroll down here for a couple of them. Luis Castillo. Not only that, at least in 97, they had to go against your boys. And they took Maddox down.
Yeah.
That alone, I think, is that's good enough by me.
Well, I'm not disagreeing. I just know from my dad's recollections that, because obviously I don't remember this, but Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz in the postseason historically were just shells of themselves. I mean, of course, this is when we all believe that Atlanta sports were cursed prior to 2021. That we no longer really believe to be the case, but you know, it was one of those things where you just never really were all that confident in Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz in the postseason. Now in the regular season, obviously they're all Hall of Famers, but didn't have the same sort of effect that the name had when Maddox gets to take the ball every fifth day, but then after him it's Glavine, or after him it's Smoltz, and you could kind of use them in interchangeable order. I mean, you know, those Braves teams in the 90s were something. But yeah, not to derail your point. Go on.
No. Another point that I just thought of, and the fact that this didn't come up first for me, because this seems like the most supernatural moment of the things that we've talked about so far. 2003, they're going up against the Cubs. Now, the Cubs up to that point hadn't won since 1908.
Yep.
And I think you know which moment I'm leading into.
Yep.
Steve Bartman.
Yep. Steve Bartman.
And the curse of the Billy Goat. Or excuse me, Curse of the Billy Goat was before that, but the Bartman curse, essentially.
Yeah.
So I think even then, I wonder if I can put this into the criteria of miracles, in that there has to be one moment that almost seems supernatural. Supernatural isn't the way to put it, but
yeah, some moment of divine intervention.
There you go, divine intervention. I think there has to be at least one moment of that. With the 95 Mariners, I would say that's probably that was the double. That was divine intervention. Like, sure, we got the first two runners over, but Jack McDowell was lights out. So, and I'm trying to think in 2004. I get the first moment that I can think of, at least with 2004, and I can't remember if it was the grand slam by Big Papi, if that was 03 or 04.
It must have been 03, because I don't think he had a grand slam in 04, at least not in games 4 through 7. I'm thinking.
I'll tell you what. People might not think this is supernatural, but I want to say that the Dave Roberts steal is probably the moment that I would say.
I was going to say Dave Roberts.
When I looked at that tape this morning several times from all of the angles, not only was the pitch good, Posada had the transfer. He got the ball out of his glove as quick as he possibly could at Hall of Fame level. Made an absolute dart to second base. It was a perfect throw. Sure, he might have had to swipe a foot to get Roberts, who slid on the outside of the bag, but I think Roberts knew that and was going towards the outside anyway.
Yeah.
But everything, like, that's one of those moments, at least for the Yankees, where every single thing went right. They could have pitched out to him and they might not have caught him.
Yeah.
Dave Roberts, I think, I don't want to misquote him, but it seemed to me when he was being interviewed about this moment that it was just like, I just put my head down. Like, I didn't even, there were no thoughts coming into his head of how he should run, which way he should go. Should he deke? Should he go try to swipe the bag from behind or whatever? He just something else took over for him.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when Bill Miller drove him in, it was just like, oh, finally we can release from that sort of bit.
Yeah, well, I would call that a moment of divine intervention, because like you're saying, it's everything went right for the Yankees and they still didn't get him. And this is the more astonishing thing from that specific moment. It's not that everything went right, like it was a good pitch and a good throw, etc. by Posada. The whole world knew he was going on that pitch.
Oh, I mean,
Rivera threw over 3-4 times. And I think the third one, they almost got him. Yeah, they were keeping Roberts as close as humanly possible, which obviously in 2023 won't be allowed, because you only get 2 pickoffs now unless you get him on the third. A lot of these rule changes in baseball are going to just wreak havoc on our conventional wisdom. But we'll get to that later.
Understanding.
Yes, all of that's going to go out the window this year. But the point being, the world knew Roberts was going, and they still couldn't get him. I mean, that had to be it. For me, that was it. I mean, that was like, wow. That was probably the entire series, because, you let the Red Sox win Game 4, and then let them win Game 5. They go back to New York. They get Schilling, who's just on all I mean, let's be real. Is there a non-zero chance that Schilling was on a little something during that start, where his sock is bleeding like crazy? I mean, I think
I wouldn't go to confession and say.
I'd say it's a fairly non-zero chance that there was something else in his system that helped him out a little bit. Not like steroids, of course, but like just a very strong pain
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Gotta protect ourselves. Allegedly.
Big ol' asterisk.
Bloody sock asterisk. But it's like the chain of events just happened to work out. It's like with I know we talked about this briefly yesterday, but it's kind of like with Infinity War with the Avengers. It's like you go in time in the future and you look at 14 million potential outcomes and there's only one where you win. I mean, that was the one outcome for the Red Sox in which they realistically could have won and did win that series. And then once they won that series, it was kind of like, well, if they come back 3-0 against the Yankees, there's no chance the Cardinals, who won 104 games, I think, in 2004, had any shot at that. And of course, they get swept. I mean, it was just absolutely insane how everything just panned out perfectly for the Sox. And that's one of the reasons I would classify it as literally a miracle.
Yeah. And no, I would agree with that. And like we said, it's so arbitrary. You could poke holes in every single one of these arguments. But at the same time, it's kind of like with Hall of Fames. You got to pick some. You know what I mean? You got to pick those moments that seem the most self-evident. It's almost like for the people who didn't vote like 99% Hall of Fame for somebody like Babe Ruth or that's a little different because that was the first one. But I would say DiMaggio. I think DiMaggio was he got in the highest rated. I know it's not 100%. It wasn't. But at the same time.
I mean, but you think about and not to sidetrack the miracle discussion too much, but like between Mariano and Griffey, I mean, yes, it's a case of which one comes first, and I think we will have more kind of unanimous Hall of Famers. But can you really make a case that, like, I look at the Hall of Fame voting, and obviously we've talked about it, and we'll probably talk about it a little further down the road as well. But I've talked about it in the case that if you can't make a rational argument against this player being a Hall of Famer, you have to vote yes. And obviously it doesn't work that way because journalists are very strange when it comes to Hall of Fame voting. But it's just, can you make a rational argument why in his first year of eligibility, Ken Griffey Jr. is not a Hall of Famer? And for every player, for every journalist who had a vote that year, the answer is no. You can't make an argument against that he's a Hall of Famer. One person voted, yeah, I can make a rational argument as to why he's not a Hall of Famer. And that's probably, I mean, we're talking about nitpicking this beer, which, by the way, I'm ready for beer number 2. But
yep, I'm there too.
It's a question of the biggest nitpick in the world to find a reason why you can't say Ken Griffey Jr. is a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Famer. I mean, yes, he is now, and it was at like 99.7%. But that 0.3 is going to bother a lot of people for, I think, a long time. It should bother some people for a long time. It bothers me still. Because he's a Hall of Famer. First ballot. Should have been. Unanimous. Oh,
it doesn't bother me that much because we've talked about it before. There are writers that invent their own rules for themselves. But in terms of miracles, what was the other one that you had? Because I know you had 2. We talked about the Red Sox in 2013 as an improbability rather than a miracle.
Yeah, I mean,
of course, we talked about 04.
We talked about 04 and 13 as well. I was going to throw the Braves in 21 there as a counter argument / petty argument from talking about the Mets as much as we are. It's watch
not, any other teams? Like
no others. I don't watch any other teams.
Any other team?
They're the Sox and the Braves. The origins are in Boston.
I mean, look, I think something, especially the 21 Braves. No, that's not a miracle.
No, that's in there completely out of spite and because I'm petty.
Something I want to at least put on the board is the 2019 Nationals.
Yeah, Yeah, I kind of had to block that one out of memory because it hurt to see the Nationals win one before the Braves won another one. So
It
that
sucks
hurt me.
Because you have to understand the history of Washington.
Yeah.
Washington Senators were a team, I'm going to go back because I have to look up the Minnesota Twins history first because I had the Washington Nationals. So this is back when they were the Senators, not the Vikings. That doesn't help. But looking at oh my goodness, I need to Minnesota Twins. There we go. Now I can learn how to type. The Washington team, let's go. Washington. Oh, now I got to go this way. There we go. Okay, Washington Senators. So since 1905, they had only won one World Series until the 1950s. That's when they moved to Minnesota. And of course, Minnesota, once they reached there, they decided to win a couple of titles. But then a new iteration of Washington team comes in. Same Senators, but they didn't stay there long enough. They went to Texas instead. And so baseball just wasn't in the nation's capital for the longest time. And then all of a sudden, hey, 2005, after Jeffrey Loria, the second time that name has come up, nuked the Montreal Expos, and then he got his franchise awarded in Florida. And now you have the Nationals, who aren't off to a great start. I mean, they had a couple of huge prospects that were a big part of it way down the line. This was 2005, 2004-ish?
Yep.
Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg, and of course, big acquisitions in Max Scherzer. But name me another big piece on that Nationals team in 2019. I guess there's Soto, but
Trey Turner.
Trey Turner. Okay. So those are 5 pieces. So 3 in the field.
Anthony Rendon
and
Victor Robles. I mean, okay. Listen, So here's my thing, and I don't want to completely derail the argument. I'm not disagreeing, of course. I mean, it was probably the biggest upset in the last 15 years from a baseball perspective, as far as like who really, on the balance of the entire season, the way everything has gone for that franchise in this, that season, the season before, last 3 or 4 seasons, it's one of the bigger upsets for sure. But let's make no mistake, like, this Nationals team was not a horrible, objectively horrible baseball team. They were a pretty good squad. I mean, obviously some of the players are either better now than they were back then, or had not become the players they are now. They weren't the players they are now at that point in time. But they were quite a good ball club. They had Ryan Zimmerman, who had been around for forever. He just recently retired. Trey Turner was just kind of getting his feet under him. Juan Soto was, I think, a rookie. I think he was a rookie in 2019, technically, because I think he debuted late in 18, and then 2019 was his first full year. Strasburg had been in the year for a while. Harper had just went to Philadelphia, so he was out of the picture. But Victor Robles had just come up, played Gold Glove center field. Talked about Soto, Strasburg, Scherzer, big piece, big contract. I can't remember if Jordan Zimmerman was part of that team as well as Ryan Zimmerman. Different person, no relation. Kurt Suzuki and Howie Kendrick had kind of been around the league for a while, but kind of journeyman. You wouldn't put him in that same category. Anthony Rendon had long been one of the most unheralded third basemen in all of baseball, but really quietly effective. I mean, it's not like the Nats were like
the Hank Aaron of third baseman.
I will say though,
man, Hank Aaron was so until he broke Barry Bonds' record, nobody knew about him.
Yeah, true. I mean, but like Anthony Rendon hitting a homer left-handed last year was one of the moments of the year. I mean, I get it, the dude's on a horrible contract from an Angels perspective, but the dude is a right-handed hitter. He turned around and hit lefty and hit a bomb off of Brett Phillips. I mean, how can you not laugh if you're a baseball fan? It's just funny. But no. Yes, the bullpen had been catastrophic for the Nationals in the first half of the year, but I mean, the trade deadline is a great time to turn any bullpen from catastrophic into less than garbage. And they got hot right when they needed to. And look, they beat juggernauts to get to the World Series. They beat the Dodgers They beat the Astros in the World Series in 7 games while the Astros were still cheating. And then obviously the offseason after that World Series is when all the cheating was revealed to us all. And then that World Series was the last World Series of it was the last pre-COVID World Series.
Hey, and that's a big argument, at least for them, is that even while the Houston Astros had that big cheating scandal going, still won.
No, and that's
against Houston.
And that's a hilarious thing.
Houston's team is pretty stacked.
Houston was 0 for 4 in games in their own ballpark while they were cheating. Or allegedly.
This is another mental note for another time. It's something that I think is interesting that hasn't been talked about yet. Sure, there's stuff like steroids in baseball. They can help you with your strength, but do they make you a better hitter? Do they make you a better player? That's like part of it. Number 2, even if you're cheating, does it really help? Because let's be honest with ourselves. Like, say you knew what pitch is coming. Somebody slams the bat on the trash can or what have you to indicate that there's an off pitch, or an off-speed pitch, I should say. You don't know which off-speed pitch. You don't know where it's going. Because, like, it's a difference between, like, a slider doing a lateral cut towards the outside if you're a right-handed hitter and it's a right-handed pitcher, or if it's a curveball, just goes straight down, or if you have not a 2-seam fastball, I was saying off-speed. Say if the pitcher throws a screwball. Say Fernando Valenzuela came back, they got a hologram of him.
Or if it's
and
like
he has a ball that goes this way, you know?
Or if it's like a
that
splitter.
Goes the opposite way of a slider. You just don't know.
Right.
And I think that's the big argument with Barry Bonds is like, sure, he was taking steroids, but that doesn't replace the fact that he's got to see what he's seeing and hit what he's hitting.
And the thing with steroids...
You can be as strong as you want.
There you go.
You could get Thor there. Tor Bjornsson out there, the guy from Game of Thrones, probably wouldn't be able to hit the ball that at all.
Yeah, you still have to be very good at what you do to do that. I mean, and this is the thing that I think gets misconstrued, specifically that now that you mentioned Barry Bonds, it gets misconstrued because steroids don't just make you bigger. They make it easier to train for you to get bigger, but they don't just make you bigger, right? They help you build and retain mass, but you still have to go and build and retain that mass, right? It's not a just put a needle in my arm and all of a sudden I'm just a marionette, you know, right? You don't just turn into a home run hitting monster overnight. You still have to know how to hit. And knowing how to hit is knowing more than just how to swing a baseball bat in the right spot at the right time. It's the approach at the plate. It's the timing. It's the kind of long-tailed view of how do I perform my best as a hitter. But that's neither here nor there. I think going back to the Nationals, they had, as we take our second sipping, they had...
Oh, yeah. I've been taking a bunch of second sippings.
Well, we gotta love... I mean, it's a double IPA. How can I expect you to not?
It's how do you expect me to just... It's like in the gameplay that we have. How do you expect me to hold my temper? I can't. That's just one of the things you readily accept. When you tune in, when you play with me, it's not directed at you. It's directed towards an inanimate object. But I's gonna do it.
He's gonna do it to you. But no,
because if everything doesn't cater to me, it sucks.
He says words, folks. But I guess to bring it back to the Nats and to kind of tie up that, I guess, counter argument that you wanted to bring up before we get to potentially more miracles, or if you will, or looking at more miracles versus improbabilities. It's not that the Nats were a bad team, and I remember this as you mentioned the Nats. There was a really funny stat that basically was if you beat the Brewers, you were going to the World Series that year, or going to or win the World Series. I think starting from 2018. When the Dodgers beat the Brewers and ended up in the World Series. Red Sox beat the Dodgers, beat the Brewers. 2019, the Nats beat the Brewers in the wild card game. end up in the World Series. 2020, Dodgers beat the Brewers again, World Series. 2021, the Braves beat the Brewers. Braves won the World Series. So I think it was some kind of funny stat where it's like if you beat the Brewers at some point, you're guaranteed to go to the World Series, if not win it. So that to me was kind of funny. But the Nationals are in 2019 one of those things where it in some ways I think it mirrors the Braves, because it's like it's not like they were necessarily a bad team. You could even make this argument for the Phillies in 2023. Yes, they didn't win the World Series, but the same kind of thing where they weren't necessarily bad for the whole season. I mean, the Phillies, it took Girardi getting fired for them to get to that point. But after that, they weren't a bad team. They just weren't necessarily expected to go there. They had an outside chance, and everything just kind of went right for them. But would we go as far as to call that a miracle? No, I think you and I are kind of, at least for the Phillies in 23, no. Braves in 21, no. Or Phillies in 22, rather. Maybe I'm from the future and I'm actually talking about 22. Or I'm actually talking about 23.
Honestly, I'd be okay with the Phillies winning another championship, but the Mariners have got to win one. I'd rather Slam Diego win one. A team that hasn't won one yet, I would prefer. A slight segue, just because I wanted to see what ESPN people had to say, because they're clearly the experts in everything.
The worldwide leader in sports.
So author Bill James, I don't know if it was an article or a book, but he talks about 3 teams that he quotes as miracle teams. You have the 1961 Cincinnati Reds. I think he frames this in the most surprise pennant winners, obviously, because the next team is the 67 Boston Red Sox. I'd give them that. 67, I mean, Boston hadn't even sniffed anywhere near postseason appearance, I think, since 1940, when Ted Williams had his first 400 year before he went off to war.
Yep.
And then the 69 Mets, when they won it all. And so this is the way that Bill James, a well-respected author in baseball, by the way.
Right, the guy who wrote the Moneyball book.
Yeah, so 4 ways the team can show a dramatic improvement. So this is more specifically what the teams are doing in order to... See, this is funny, because he says this is the way teams can show dramatic improvement. Make good trades, come up with young players from the system, young players they already have that improve, and veterans have some career seasons. So my thing with that is all of those are favoring towards stacking cards with you, if you're on this particular team.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not essentially what they're looking for. I get where he's coming from, but I'm interested to see. So he goes a little bit into depth. 1961, a few trades. Yeah, just even looking through these, I'm thinking, well, yeah, the teams made their setup to where it made it work. I think that makes it less of a miracle to know that they had everything set up for them. If you had nothing set up for you, I think that makes the miracle argument even harder, or even stronger for that. And so I'm wondering maybe if we scroll down here, because they said athletic teams. Oh, let's talk about it. Speaking of the Angels, 0-2, baby.
Yeah.
0-2.
Yeah.
Thank you, ESPN article. I knew that there were things in there. I knew it wasn't off to a great start when there was like, well, they did all of the trades and all of the people had their career years. Like, yeah, sure. But the Angels hadn't made a postseason since 86. Long time ago. Mariners had a little something to do with that. Trades was only for they gave away Mo Vaughn.
Yeah.
And
Mo Vaughn
even
was a
what
hitter.
they got in return, Appier, he missed most of that 2001 season, but Kevin Appier, never heard of. Brad Fulmer, Brian Cooper's at 531 as the team's DH. Sure, a DH. That he's not a field player,
Right.
not making an impact in anything other than hitting. Let's look at their farm system. John Lackey came up during the season, went 9-4, 3.66. Okay, that's a big piece.
Okay, yeah, it's decent.
And Brendan Donnelly, who is a 30-year-old rookie reliever, had been let go by 7 different teams, but had 2.17 ERA in 49 games. That, to me, is miracle argument, because he had no reason to be good, but he somehow found a way. Now, maybe if we looked into it, he's like, well, I changed my mechanics, and instead of coming back with my elbow like this, I kept it higher on my release point and all that kind of stuff. But as it's saying now, I would say pretty big miracle argument right there. The trades, definitely a miracle argument there. Young players, they had Jared Washburn and Ramon Ortiz, the best years of their careers. I have not heard of any of those guys since then. I would say that's pretty good miracle fodder, as twere.
As tis.
Adam Kennedy. Now, I remember Adam Kennedy, former Mariner Adam Kennedy.
Mm.
And this is the only thing that he improved from a 1.3 to a 4.4 WAR. Now, that I'm not saying that isn't significant, but I'm not saying that's like direct improvement. I don't know how else to put it other than the fact it's like, wow, he just had a great year that year. All of the pieces somehow came into place in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Veterans, Garrett Anderson had the best season of his career according to WAR. Tim Salmon had a he had a bad year the year before, but a good year with 3.7. Like, that's good, but I think if we're looking for all-star caliber pieces, if we're looking for dynasty Yankee caliber pieces, I'm looking at something like 5 or 6,
right,
instead of 3. Darren Erstad, again, 3.4 WAR.
Yeah.
I mean,
nothing that really jumps out. And here's now where I will throw in a bigger wrench into this argument, into this discussion. We've talked about miracles and improbabilities and the distinction between the two of them, right? At what point does this conversation become less about miracles and more so just about underdogs? I think that's something that is.
Well, I think being an underdog is one of the requirements of being in a miracle.
Right. It goes hand in hand, but I think there's a lot to be said about the difference between the fact that someone may be an underdog or it may be. I mean, there's underdogs, there's long shot underdogs, there's miracles. The line is starting to get blurred between, I think, what we would establish to be, what we would believe to be an underdog, an improbability, and a miracle. Somewhere between those three, and I have handily enough the Merriam-Webster definition of miracle pulled up right in front of us for our very enjoyment. So, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a miracle is 1, an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs, or an extremely outstanding or unusual event, thing, or accomplishment. So the line, I'd say, is not a line. I'd say it's a Venn diagram where the circles are all very close
just like
together.
The fears?
Yeah.
Well, we know that this is arbitrary. Like, are we confirmedly right in any of these arguments? No. We've just been blowing hot air for the past almost 2 hours.
And
but
folks, that's called a podcast. Ding! Show done.
And that's like, I think that just has to be the thesis at the end of the day. It's like, well, we just talked about things for about 2 hours, and we've just come to the fact that nothing matters, and we're all just specks of dust floating in the wind. Existential dread, featuring Brews and Baseball and Trustworthy Brewing Company.
I think I found.
All right. Well,
I think I just found God.
If there's anything you should know, is that we're always right. That's it. That's the bottom line.
We're right all the time, with no debate or discussion necessary.
And we wouldn't say that we're experts of the game of baseball. We are fans that remember the certain events too, because that's the thing about a miracle is like I look towards religious miracles, right? In particular.
Yep.
When people tell the story, it's they remember the experience they had when they were watching it. You know what I mean? So some of these miracles were just miracles because of the media's presentation of it, of our recollection of it. I think many arguments could be made across generations, across teams, and they might all be equally worthy. But that's why we're here, is just to iron out the details. What is a miracle? Is this thing a particular miracle? And chances are the answer is probably.
It's the shrug the shrug little emoji. It's I don't know, maybe.
But also I think a big argument for the Angels too is they won the World Series.
Yes.
I like the one hit wonders, as twere, I think already have a big help for their argument in terms of miracles, because at least off of what I'm talking about, the Angels, I think, were owned by Disney at that time. But they didn't. They lost money off of the Angels. They had to lose money just to keep that franchise going, even when they won the World Series. So, I mean, that's another thing, is like most of the time when the cards are stacked up against these one-hit wonders, that's just another argument that they have.
It honestly is it is a long-term discussion of what we really value in the sense of a miracle, of an improbability. It's in the eye of the beholder, really. And we've made that point a lot, but I think it's really important to just for all of us to kind of remember when we talk about these things. It's like how you choose to remember something becomes probably the biggest part of it, because you could talk about the Red Sox in 2004, you could talk about the Angels in 2002, you could talk about the Mariners in 95, but really all of them are kind of, they're unique in their own specific ways because of what the stakes are for each one of them, and that's what makes it uniquely just good theater for the consumer. That's what makes it entertaining to watch. That's why we are baseball fans the way we are. I mean, 2004 was one of the biggest, if not the single biggest, push towards me being a like diehard baseball fan now, is because the stakes were so high and the odds were so heavily stacked against the Red Sox, and they ended up winning the whole thing. That shows you basically what anything's possible. I mean, we were very impressionable youths at that time, 8-9 years old. So it's just one of those things.
To be fair, it's the Dodgers and the Mariners weren't all that great at that time. The only thing we had to look forward to is in 2004, at least, that's when Ichiro broke Sisler's record. That's all I got. That is all I got. Don't ask me about anything in the 2000s. I would say after 2003, those times, as far as I'm concerned, did not exist for me as a baseball team for my fans.
Yeah. So that's just one of those things. And we talked about lines being blurred, just like we've talked about styles of beer being blurred with our Tower One Double IPA tonight, which has been exceptional.
What a segue back into the beers for the night. I was going to say is like, you know what? First, let's wrap up. I think we need to wrap up the whole miracle thing. I'm not saying that you didn't, but just to make it nice, crisp, and clear.
Yep.
What we were trying to discuss with miracles is what constitutes as a miracle. And I think we've kind of figured out is that the cards have to be stacked against that particular team.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to look at the history of that team, and most of the time it has been riddled without success.
Yep.
what cards do they have, or how few cards I say they should have.
Mm-hmm.
So say you're playing Catan, right? Everybody else has got all the resources, and you have a sheep. You have a sheep, and that's it. And you need to build some roads like fast.
Yeah, you're about to get fastest road, but the guy next to you is sitting on 4 brick
Fastest road.
longest road. I'm telling you, 8% ABV, double IPA, my friends. This will get you.
My goodness. So the
longest road. Longest road.
And so what constitutes as a miracle? And I think we've come to the determination that a big determining factor is how baseball fans remember it.
Yep.
And also, you can make arguments for a bunch of things. You're not right or wrong for each one. Personally, I think miracles happen in baseball every day. They're small at the very least. I would say the miracle of baseball for today is that big cack Daniel Vogelback still looks so good, even though he reported to spring training today 20 pounds lighter. And he's still hitting ding-dongs. I'd say that is a miracle.
He's
Him
still
hitting 250 and having a renaissance with the New York Mets in 2022 is a miracle. And now, back to your statements about the DIPA, my friends, and also our final ratings while we're at it.
He's still the president of the Daddy Ding Dong Gang as far as Brews and Baseball is concerned.
Austin Riley is the vice president.
Austin Riley is the chairman and CEO. The president reports to the chairman and CEO. And the founder of the Daddy Ding Dong Game.
They both can pound a couple of grinders, though. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, boys are built for dingers. No, I think I was just gonna cap off my discussion of this beer with, look, the fact that I have this much left after an hour and a half is not an indictment of the beer. This is an 8% double.
Yeah,
double
we have to
IPA.
be safe. I mean,
we're
how I've been doing so.
Yeah, and we both try to go to the gym in the morning before we go to work, so it's a little tough sometimes. I will be finishing this beer. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go downstairs and debrief and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but,
we have much to discuss as far as our debrief. But we hope you have been enjoying this content so far in 2023. We've been working really hard on revamping what Brews and Baseball looks like, what the content schedule looks like. Of course, if you are not following us on all of our social medias, on this YouTube channel, on Spotify, then what are you doing with your lives? I don't understand. Brews and Baseball official on social media and at Brews and Baseball here on YouTube. That's, of course, where you're watching us live right now.
Right this very second.
I'm going to stick with my very solid rating of 75. I think this is a really, really good beer. My only note is more of a, I guess, trustworthy wide kind of sense that the lines between the types of beers are kind of getting blurred, and that's not a bad thing inherently, because sometimes you want to have an IPA that has less bite. I think in this case there's a little bit, maybe it's just me, but I can taste a little bit of extra kind of aftertasty bitterness to it. And it's a huge contrast from the initial sip. The first sip, I thought, it's like, wow, this tastes like juice. Like, I'm not sugary, but it tastes like it's juicy is the only word I can use to describe it. Not to get too descriptive. Not to get too descriptive. That's how I'd call it. Beef. 75 out of 80 is my final rating. What are you at? You're 77 to start. What are you at now?
I'm gonna take it down a notch, and I wouldn't say that. I'm gonna say 76 out of 80. The reason behind it is part of me misses in a double IPA the harshness and the punch. It's just that's one of the things that I genuinely enjoy in beers, and I find that if you don't have it in a chilled glass and you just reuse the one before, the flavors tend to mollify a bit. It almost kind of gives a similar sensation to me as advanced placement. Not to say that advanced placement was bad, but the flavors were a lot more muted in that, with the exception of that citrusy thing at the end. And I kind of miss it.
Yeah, that's
I kind of
understandable.
miss it.
Yeah, and again, none of this is harsh criticism. It's more so just minor nitpicks. Anything above 70 out of 80 on this scale, I would say constitutes a great beer.
Yeah.
For right now, though, I don't know. It's more so just a small little detail here and there. And again, we've talked about this on the show and just in general. It's so hard to have a beer that's 80 out of 80, for example, or like a perfect 100%, 10 out of 10 no notes. I don't think I've ever had a beer that's 10 out of 10 no notes, because, and the other thing too, and I don't know how you feel about this, Reese, and I'll just say, for me, it's an environmental thing, right? Sometimes I want an IPA on the top of a mountain, but sometimes I need a lager that's very, shall we say, drinkable if it's like 95 degrees out and 90% humidity,
Yeah, I totally get that too. I still think I would have to confirm to taste the brass jar again, but I still think this is up there as one of my favorites from them.
Yeah, I would say so too.
Just from the fact that if people are scared about drinking double IPAs because of the reputation that most IPAs get, I'd say this is the one that you would have. It's fantastic. Me, as a regular IPA drinker, would prefer more harshness, more punch, but at the same time, oh man, could I drink several of these and regret my decisions later? You bet. And I think that's as good as testament as I could give to any beer that we've got.
Yep. I think there's no way to put it any better than that. Truly, with beer this good, you can't put it any more succinctly than that, especially from someone who drinks a lot of IPAs. I mean, this would be the equivalent of me drinking a lager like last night. So I think the two beers we had this week were pretty in line with our general tastes for beers.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
a job well done picking these beers, Reese. We've gone through a lot talking about miracles in baseball, and it is a miracle we've made it this far in the offseason without either one of us going certifiably insane without the lack of professional baseball. I think Saturday is the beginning of spring training games in earnest, so we'll be able to see some stickball at the professional level again, at the major league level again, and I, for one, am excited for the season to see what more miracles we may have in store for 2023 in Major League Baseball. And be a miracle if the show 23 fixes all the issues that 22 has had. Cough, cough, hitting engine, cough, cough.
Cough, cough, vroom, vroom, cough, cough.
Vroom, vroom, cough, cough. Austin Riley, go ding dong, cough, cough.
Nightmare fuel, please God help me.
Daniel
J. Welbeck, take me away.
Can't wait for the trailer.jpg.
Yeah, I'm cooking up something special. Look.
Yeah.
I know I overexert myself for the bit, so we'll have to see whether or not it happens, but I went on a spiritual retreat after that game, and I got in touch with nature and the energetical existence that we all maintain as beings of this universe, and
should we call you
I might have some anger issues.
Should we call you Ayahuasca Aaron now? you and Perk Rogers.
Reese Rogan.
Reese Rogan. Oh my God. All right. Well, that's the sign that we've been doing this show for too long, folks. This has been episode 4 of the Brews and Baseball podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find these episodes on Spotify, on YouTube, Thursday mornings, 7 a.m. Pacific time. The VODs go live 7 a.m. on Thursdays, as with the podcast. You can catch us every Tuesday and Wednesday, youtube.com/@Brews and Baseball. I know it's a little bit of a handful, but bear with us. youtube.com/@Brews and Baseball for all of your needs every Tuesday and Wednesday. We will be back next Tuesday. Another couple great beers. You will not want to miss them. If you're not following us on social media, then what are you doing?
Brews and Baseball Official on Instagram and TikTok. Those are the two places to find us. Our socials have been flashing through at the bottom of the screen. My Twitter's on there as well, in case you want to tweet at us. You're on Twitter frequently. Reese is not on Twitter, but I am way too much, unfortunately.
It's
but
just
still,
not
get
a
in touch.
good idea for me to be on Twitter. Just not a great idea.
It's not a great platform, honestly, but I'm on there too much, so we're just doubling down on that as is. Anyways, that's our show, folks. Episode 4 of the podcast is in the books. As we say here at Brews and Baseball,